Yes, hello and welcome to Unplugged. We're back for week 3. A big thank you to all of those that have downloaded the podcast over the first couple. You can get that via iTunes and Spotify and Pitcher and all of the like, and of course straight to Wooshka for our podcast channel. Darren Parkin is my name. Nick Splitter and Aaron McGrath will join me very shortly, as will a special guest on the program this week, which we'll unveil for you very, very shortly. We'll also reflect on, unfortunately, St Kilda's first defeat since we started this little podcast a couple of weeks ago. A frustrating 22-point loss to Adelaide, a game that presented many opportunities. Unfortunately, we weren't quite able to nail it. Last home game for the club this week at Marvel Stadium. They do get a reciprocal home game against Carlton the week after at the MCG, but last chance at Marvel Stadium for the group, and hopefully a strong finish to the season ahead. We'll welcome our boys, as we said, Nick Splitter and Aaron McGrath. First of all, Nick, nice to have you with us after what was a pretty frustrating Saturday night.
Yeah, nice to be back. It was frustrating. A lot didn't go right for us. We talked about it last week, and pretty much everything we said kind of happened, except for all the good stuff that we said. So that was a bit
the things we were worried about, yeah.
The things that we were worried about kind of happened, and we just didn't handle it well. But we'll touch on that later.
We will, and we just couldn't quite nail the opportunities. There were plenty of them, though.
No, had plenty of the ball inside the 50, just could not finish. And we knew we were going to be able to get there, but just that last step, just to get them over the line, but not quite.
Yeah, couldn't edge our nose in front. We spoke about reminiscing before we get into the round review. Last week we spoke about our earliest memory. At the time that we are recording this podcast, it's the 31st anniversary of Robert Harvey's first game for St Kilda back in 1988. He played the last 4 of the season under Darryl Baldock, also retired at around about this time back in 2008. So his favourite Robert Harvey memory, whether it's one goal, one game, starting with you, H, do you have one that stands out?
As you say, one goal. We've got to go back to Adelaide in 2005. Taking the mark in the pocket, sliding it through, giving us the win in Adelaide. Could have gone on further that year, but yeah, we fell over the end there against Sydney, obviously, afterwards.
And while we're on the topic, we actually came with audio. Here is that goal. Robert Harvey v the Adelaide Crows in the qualifying final of 2005.
To Fisher again out wide. Milne picked up by Hart. Beautifully read Del Santo. Got it to Milne. Back to Del Santo. Into the pocket. Harvey. He's done it all tonight. Any score will put them in front. It's a 6-pointer.
What a game he played that night. An absolute blinder. Nick, yours?
Another goal-kicking memory for someone who's not known for his goal-kicking, but he slotted one from the boundary against West Coast in Perth in a game that we had no right to win, and he kind of pulled us over the line again in that game. There's a lot of memories. There's a lot of times that he really put us on his back and carried us through some tough times and then some good times coming to the end of his career. But what a player.
And here is that magical goal that Nick referred to from 1997.
Harvey tries to take Simmons on, buys another 20 metres from Hart on the boundary. That's a sensational kick. Robert Harvey, excellent work.
They should rub that number 35 off his back and put a sign there that says, "Follow me."
I could have nominated, even in that Adelaide game, there was the other goal he kicked in the second quarter where he ran around the man on the mark and drilled it from 50. But mine's also against West Coast, but a different game. Horrible season for St Kilda in a game we ultimately didn't win, but the draw against West Coast at the start of the year 2000 when St Kilda were mounting a rally in the last quarter. Our guest a little bit later on kicked 7 in this particular game. But Robert Harvey took the ball out of the middle, lost possession, and then kicked it off the ground and chipped it over Ben Cousins and then ran onto it and kicked a goal from outside 50 on the run, which drew us back. I think that's one of the best goals he ever kicked. So, and here is the goal I speak of. Round 3, 2000 at what was then known as Colonial Stadium.
And they're going forward. Palolo's kick was a wobbler. Harvey brilliant. Can he kick another one and really get them in it? Oh, he's done it.
Oh, that's magnificent.
Overforward by Robert Harvey.
That was one of the most inspirational passages of play that I've seen in a long, long time.
That's the one that stands out for me for Robert Harvey, and certainly wish that he was rolling around at the moment, but we'll jump into our round review.
The Saints Footy Review. Ball pumped towards Otten and Membry. Oh, long. Took it. Didn't need to break stride. Get into the celebrations now, Ben. What a goal.
But there's a little bit more to it. We've sort of started the process with the boys in regard to our offence wasn't quite there today the way that we'd like, and that's a bit of a credit to Adelaide as well. But defensively towards the end, they had 5 inside 50s and scored 3 times. So we have to defend longer, or just defend when it's our turn at times. So I didn't think we did that as well as we could have at the start of the game, start of the second, and probably start of the third a bit. They got some scoreboard, and we couldn't put them under pressure enough on the scoreboard to, maybe bring out some cracks in their game, or put that doubt in their head, and that allowed them to play the way they wanted to play for most of the night.
So one of the early highlights from last week, Ben Long's brilliant goal just before the quarter-time siren off the outside of the right boot from 45 metres out, and then Brett Ratton with a summary as to where perhaps the Saints weren't capitalising on the things they've capitalised on in recent weeks and allowed Adelaide too much momentum. And we spoke a little bit about just the inability to poke their nose in front at crucial stages in that contest when they were really pressing. That might have raised some doubts for the Adelaide Crows. It was Adelaide 14-8-92, defeating St Kilda 10-70, 22-point result. Felt like they were within striking distance most of the way through. And we had a lot of good performers without a lot of dominant performers, and unfortunately there were probably half a dozen guys that on the day were passengers, as harsh as that sounds. They just didn't quite meet that. It's probably look at guys like Josh Battle, who I think felt the pinch first up after a couple out. He'll certainly be fine. Some of the late ins, Mackenzie struggled a little bit. Parker, who was a late in, struggled a little bit. They weren't expecting to play, obviously. And I thought we had a couple of guys that were just a fraction down. Nick Hind struggled a little bit, but certainly a game we could have won. Nick?
Definitely, I think we could have won it. There were some moments that we just didn't execute in key moments. I think we heard Brett Ratton after the match talk about some of the things that the Crows did just a little bit better than us, and I think controlling the corridor, they controlled the ball a little bit better than we did. Just being able to hold the ball for longer and keep it in key moments when in the same sort of moments we would turn it over and lose control. I think, like you said, there were some players that just didn't quite cut it on the weekend. Matthew Parker, I've been a huge rap for all season. I think we spoke earlier off air that not too long ago he was playing the twos in the waffle, and I think maybe this year the extra effort, the extra training, the AFL lifestyle and culture has probably caught up to him a little bit towards the end of the season, and he looked a bit cooked to me in the back half of this year, but certainly showed enough to warrant why we picked him when we did, and really excited to see what he brings to the table in future seasons.
Yeah, and I think we pointed out last week that one of the major problems was going to be the ball getters that they have of Laird and the Crouch boys, and I looked at that and then saw that they had 102 possessions between the three of them, so sort of let them off the chain a little bit, and every time Laird, I don't think he missed the target all night.
No.
His kick out of the fence, it landed in their hands every time. It's the one thing we said we needed to defend and make them kick over us, but they just got free too often.
And you could see Eddie Betts having an impact in his first game back. You sort of had that dreaded feeling when they picked him, and Taylor Walker got us last time and unfortunately got us this time as well. And there were a lot of frustrating goals. I mean, the one where he kicked it off the ground where we had two players in the goal square that couldn't rush it through. Just some of the turnovers out the back, and we know he's a good kick, Tex, but he was sort of nailing everything. And it's frustrating when guys that have had pretty ordinary years find their mark for that particular occasion. But yeah, I just think just a fraction off in a few key areas. A number of players. Rowan Marshall, we've spoken a lot about him, won the battle with Riley O'Brien.
He did. I think one that we missed really importantly was someone who's been kind of pilloried over the last couple of years and been a bit of a whipping boy for St Kilda supporters. Jack Nunes has played a really important role for us in recent weeks as that defensive pressure forward. And he would have been the perfect guy to negate the impact of guys like Rory Laird out of the back half. And I think we really missed his defensive effort on Laird, but also the ability for him to spot up and hit a target when he had the ball. He does have a beautiful kick around the ground when he has the ball in his hands and has the time and space to hit a target.
Yeah, we definitely did miss a couple of those, and it's always unsettling. You're never sure what impact, gastro and things like that have on the group. And I guess the downside out of that, which we'll discuss in the match committee, is Jade Gresham, who I don't think's missed a game almost since debut, fracturing an eye socket, which was straight after the halftime siren. He got cleaned up in the middle of the ground, and H will be missing him for at least the next 2, and you'd imagine probably all 3.
It sounds like all 3 weeks, but the Sydney game's not going to be a key game now. So, if he's out for another week, it's not really going to hurt us now. As good as it would be to win the last game, there's no point trying to risk him if it's not 100%. Give someone else a go, see what they can do. Hopefully, we might find something different somewhere, and let's try things.
It's a nice full stop on what's been an absolute turd of a season injury-wise for the club, that they should lose Jade Gresham in the back end of the year. But as we'll discuss a little bit later on, a few other players coming back into the fold. Just some votes. We'll go through our 3, 2 and 1 and who we thought were the standout contributors out of that. And then later on, we'll obviously discuss who might be under pressure for their spot. But 3, 2 and 1 for you, Nick.
I found it really hard to give 3, 2 and 1 this week. I thought it was a very even performance from a lot of players, and I think Rowan Marshall was probably our best in my eyes. I think Jack Steele probably the 2, and Tim Membry he was pretty commanding up forward for us, and has provided a really good target in the deep half of forward 50, and contests really well. Elite marking target for us, and very rarely misses when he has a good opportunity.
Your vote, Sage?
I've actually given Steele the 3. Just his tackling pressure in the middle of the ground, getting his own ball when he's tagging the other team already. He was on Sloane for a majority of the game. Actually ended up with more possessions than him. So he as I said, not only negates their key midfielder, but gets the ball for us too. 2, I went Marshall. Obviously, again, played another great game. Just not as dominant as what he has been, but gave us enough that we were there and thereabouts, but just didn't quite get there in the end. And 1 I've actually given to Shane Savage. He really held his own down the back line. The majority of the balls that we turned over in the middle of the field, intercept marks, were from Savage. He ran off his man a few times, made the contests, won us the ball. I think he really held his own. Yeah,
he's had a solid year, that's for sure. I went 3 to Marshall. I thought, again, his ability to keep winning his own clearances by sort of tapping it down to himself. He had way more of the ball than O'Brien, won the hit-outs to advantage, was doing it all over the ground. I gave 2 votes to Jack Billings. Sort of not his best game, but a good, solid 4-quarter performer. And as both of you have suggested, I think it was difficult to find clear standouts, which is why we've sort of, spread these votes far and wide. And 1 to Tim Membry, who was our most influential forward. Kicked 3, should have kicked 4. He hit the post with 1, but also took a lot of marks further up the ground. So we'll post this on social, but since round 20, we've only been doing this for a couple of weeks. It's 9 votes to Ross, 8 votes to Marshall, 6 votes to Gresham, 5 votes to Steele, a couple of votes to Josh Bruce and Tim Membry, with votes to Hunter Clark, Shane Savage, and they're rounding out the votes to this stage. So I thought Dunstan was okay. I thought Wilkie again played a solid game. You'd imagine he'd get best and fairest votes as well. And I guess a comment on the umpiring. We're allowed to whinge about it on things like this. I thought we didn't get exactly the right end of the pineapple on a few occasions.
Yeah, there was a couple of times where you'd see one thing called one way and then either not called only a minute or 2 later, and you're sort of a bit like, well, isn't that the same thing? It ends
the deliberate out of bounds, for example, play on advantage as well.
There was one holding the ball that I was just like, how did Adelaide get that one and we don't, when it's clearly the same?
Yeah,
they can't fine unofficial podcasts, can they?
I don't think so.
No, it was rubbish. It was absolute garbage for a lot of the game.
Well, it wasn't Alim Dar though.
Well, yeah.
It wasn't the worst umpiring of the weekend. At least that's one thing in their favour. But a frustrating day at the office. Well, before we jump into the issues of the week, going to do something a little bit different now. We're going to catch up with a very special guest for the first time on Unplugged.
In goes Beveridge, Lappin again, gathered by Fletcher, handball over the top, this may open it up, no, Dodd, Dispossessed by Everett. Well done, Spida. The big Spida. Go! Oh, he tried to bounce. It didn't come off, but he crashes through the tackle. It then goes bang, and it's play of the night by Peter Everett. Magnificent goal.
Look, yeah, Bong was right. I was one of those wayward kids, those teenagers, go through the 20s and obviously up to the 30s, and then I finally come home. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate this night.
Well, it is our pleasure on the program to catch up with one of our favourites from the Saints. Spida Everitt played 180 games for St Kilda between 1993 and 2002, a dual All-Australian, won the best and fairest in 2001 as well. Spida, thanks for jumping on.
No, it's always a pleasure. It's great to be a part of it. And, you know, when you're retired after a few years and anything to do with footy, you still got to put try and put your hat in the ring to keep yourself out there.
Going to plonk you on the spot first up. We've been, at the time that we're recording this podcast, it's the anniversary of Robert Harvey playing his first game for the Saints. So we've been reminiscing on favourite Robert Harvey memories. Is there one that stands out? I mean, you were his teammate for probably 11 years or thereabouts. So is there one thing in particular that stands out for Robert Harvey?
Do you want to give one or two or 10? No. Look, I often say that, I won Robert Harvey back-to-back Brownlows because a Rover's only as good as their ruckman. So if I decide to hit it to Nathan Burke that year or a couple of other players, Harves would never have been in the show. So I try and claim that. Not really, he did deserve them, especially when, he won the first one, unfortunately, after, Dingo got disqualified, and then he come back in 98 and won it. But Harves, I suppose, I travelled to Ireland with Harves, I roomed with Harves in the All-Australian team, and he was one not to say a lot, but I just remember on Mad Mondays, when we used to be allowed to have Mad Mondays those days, and we used to go out and go as hard as we could for pretty much 24, 48 hours, that would always end up for some reason at a blackjack table. And myself, Robert Harvey, Stephen Zilla, we all drunk Jim Beam. So we're all the bourbon drinkers. So, Harves would always be at the front of the table playing blackjack, but he'd nearly pass out. So we're always playing with Harves' money because he was on the biggest money. Myself and Zilla would be sitting behind him, getting the free bourbon and playing with his money, and he'd be asleep. The only time he'd wake up was every probably, 15, 20 minutes. The dealer would go insurance. Harves would raise his head, put a couple of dollars forward to put insurance, and then go back to sleep for another 15 minutes.
Ultimate teammate.
Oh, we loved him.
And one more from me before I hand it over to the boys as well. Probably a painful memory, but one that I have to ask. Would we have won the 97 grand final if you were there, do you reckon? I mean, you're obviously in that sort of form, and we know that Pittman and Wren were able to double-team Stewie Lowe in that grand final. Is that one where you sort of wake up occasionally and think, geez, if that shoulder hadn't have popped out, we might have won that flag?
Oh, the longer you retired, the more you say, I reckon by now we would have won by 15 goals. But, look, at the time, you're 24, you think Ozzie Jones, Tony Brown, Joel Smith, this, Maxie Hudson, this young group coming through, we're going to play it every year. So you didn't really think about it. And then when you get to the end of your career and you know that was your only real golden opportunity, you do, feel, you're disappointed about it, but at the same time, Laser Vidovic, had the knee reco, and myself and him worked really well together. And what I suppose I missed the most was the fact that myself and Sean Wren, both very similar players, both similar height, and it would have been a really, really good battle come the end of the season because we had some good battles throughout the years, and it was just that, to win the ultimate prize off a really good battle against somebody you respect so much would have been awesome, but unfortunately it was never to be. And we know how, when you look back in history books, how hard it is. 66 since the last, premiership, and been there a couple of times, but it's just so tough to get there. So didn't really appreciate it at the time, thinking it's going to happen every year. But now, as soon as you're retired and you see some guys who have got 2, 3, 4, you kind of sit there and go, you know what, that was probably our golden opportunity.
Now, Spide, Nick Splitter here, mate. Thank you for joining us on the pod. From a reasonably painful memory for all of us, how about your favourite memory in the red, white and black? Obviously, you were there through a couple of really memorable moments for Saints fans, from 96 Ansett Cup win. the whole 97
Yeah.
season, to be honest. What's your number one memory?
Oh, really, really hard because, I really appreciate the football club. And, when you walk into AFL football and you don't know, majority of us don't know where we're going to be heading, outside of school. So you get an opportunity to play footy and then it turns into a full-time career. And, the 96 Ansett Cup and, you have coaches like Stan Ells and Tim Watson come in, but then you're playing alongside players like Robert Harvey, Mickey Winmar, Gilbert McAdam, Danny Frawley, Stuart White, and the list can go on. So there's so many great memories. But I think just the fact of being inducted into the Hall of Fame earlier on in the year was probably one of the proudest moments. I was able to have all my girls there and my young fella who hopefully wants to play for the Saints one day. But just having all the family there, and then not only that, seeing so many of the former players from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and just what the club's been able to build over the last few years is just getting all the ex-players back to build a form of legacy. Because when I went to other clubs, you go to Adelaide or you go to WA and they have those players in the change rooms. So I reckon it makes a real big difference. So I suppose outside of my playing career, I just thought that was a real big highlight for me and really chuffed to be able to be inducted into the Hall of Fame and at the same time being around so many great players of so many great eras.
G'day, Spida. Aaron here. Great to speak to you. Basically, I'm going to go back to pretty early in your career. You came in after we've left Moorabbin, so you didn't see any footy out there. But fourth game in, do you remember where you were playing?
What's that, the fourth game in?
Fourth game, yep.
Yeah, well, we played a couple of 2 games at Moorabbin, and you sitting in the change rooms and you'd hear the crowd going off, and then that's when one of the trainers or one of the coaches would say, "Oh yeah, Plugger's got the ball," and you could only hear it coming through all the vents of the change rooms there at Moorabbin, and you just knew when Plugger got the ball because the crowd and the atmosphere was amazing. But fourth round in, Victoria Park, Nicky Winmar lifted up his jumper and pointed to the colour of his skin.
Scary place to play.
Oh, no, even that day I remember because such a historical game in the AFL, and I've been done for racial vilification, but played alongside some of the great Indigenous players, and that day there I remember a couple of incidents. One, I went to pick up the ball out of the gutter and I got hit over the head with an umbrella, and I looked up and I reckon the lady was about 80 and just looked at me and just started laughing. And here's what you expect at Victoria Park. There was no hot water. It was all cold showers. But as we were walking off, I reckon, it looked like beer, but it was warm. And I don't reckon it was beer that was tipped on us. So, look, they weren't the most respectful crowd, but that's what you love about footy is the passion behind it. And when Winmar done that and made a really big stance, I remember just the hype around the change rooms, the hype around just everybody just not knowing exactly how big this was going to be. Even Winmar in the change rooms was actually quite frightened, to exit, but ended up being good and ended up being the biggest statement probably in football history.
Absolutely. Now, I guess in terms of modern times, now you excelled in what was a difficult year for the club. So you won the best and fairest in 2001 when there was a coaching change. Malcolm Blight went out, Grant Thomas came in, which is a position St Kilda finds themselves in now where a coach has been sacked, there's a caretaker in the role. Can you sort of take us through what that was like in terms of how you dealt with the coaching change, what you were expecting to get out of the back half of the year? And I know you've had your clashes with Grant Thomas over recent times, but perhaps what got Grant Thomas the job in terms of being appointed after that caretaker stint?
Yeah, it's always tough, and I think this situation is totally different than Grant Thomas because Malcolm Blight and Grant Thomas were good friends. I remember flying up to the Gold Coast where I live now to get Blighty, and it was. I remember just walking into Zen, which is the Chinese restaurant at the casino, which is Star now, and getting on it for the whole night and trying to slide a contract in front of him after he'd drunken, I reckon, around about 45 bottles of red wine. So it was a remarkable circumstance. We had Rod Butters and Grant Thomas, and then obviously we know what's happened with Rod Butters and his addictions and everything, and then Grant Thomas. So that kind of situation, Grant Thomas, I don't think was, I suppose, the best person for the job, but at the same time, he was the best person that Butters and everyone knew to take over. So, Tomo controlled a lot of the footy club and not just the footy side of things. He went on to make finals, so he could actually coach. There's no doubt about that. But this time around, I think with unfortunately, the earlier Saki and now Brett Ratton taking over, I think the selection policy or theory is going to be a lot different. Brett Ratton probably being stiff to get sacked out of Carlton in the first place. Do St Kilda need a couple more players? Yes. So it's a totally different, and every year changes. And we know that. I always try to tell people this because I live on the Gold Coast at the moment and associated with the Gold Coast Suns, where it's so hard to make the top 8, let alone the top 4 or the top 2. You've got to get so many things right. And for the St Kilda Footy Club at the moment, back when Grant Thomas was, I suppose, appointed, there wasn't so many, it wasn't as harsh as it is today. 10 years ago, footy wasn't as harsh. You didn't have so many media people covering. You didn't have so many channels. Even though it was still professional, you still didn't have the harshness of what it is today. So, I think they've got their work cut out trying to find the right person, because realistically, who is the right person? It's a tough choice, because who knows? Now,
Spide, 93, 94, 95, we had a tall, kind of running, goal-kicking ruckman come in and revolutionise that position for us at the footy club. 25 years later, we've got another tall, big running, big man who can kick a goal and get around the ground in Rowan Marshall. What are your thoughts on Big Row?
Yeah, look, I watched him last weekend, and it was fantastic. And that's what you got to be able to do. Unfortunately, you look at Brody.
Brody Grundy
from Brody Grundy from Collingwood, and you look at Max Gorn. What's Max Gorn? I think, I don't know. There's a question mark still over, because I think Corey McKernan, those kind of players, Jeff White, really changed that way of how ruckman played. So I think they've got to be able to play those two positions, as you say, run back, run forward. And I remember through our career, like Dean Cox, these kind of fellas, they were in the top 5, top 6 runners in their football club. So it's no longer with a ruckman, coming in at the back end, just trying to make up the numbers. Now they're actually extreme athletes. They could cover the ground, and as you say, they could actually kick goals. I think it's vital that you've got to be able to play a couple of positions, but you need a couple of them, and you need to be able to. A lot of I suppose media outlets sit there and bag the ruckman, and then suddenly Brody Grundy has a great year and saying, he's probably in Brownlow medal form, which is great to see a ruckman actually win a Brownlow. But what he's been able to do is just extend of what happened in that 93, 94, 95 season, when the ruckman started to go forward, kick goals, be creative, and make another avenue. So what they often said, that what were we? We're rover in a big man's body. That was about it.
Yeah. Going back to another goal kicker that has revolutionised the game. You've got to play with him a couple of years to start with, but Nick Revolt, when he first started at the club and came in, and did you know that he was going to revolutionise the game like he did? The running forward that basically no one could catch.
Yeah. Oh no. There's no way. I remember when he first got drafted, him and Justin Kaczynski, I think, a couple of days later, they go on these training camps these days to, high altitude over at San Francisco or over to Arizona, and they do Cape, they do Kokoda, they do all this. When Nick first got drafted, Grant Thomas took us to Warrnambool, and we went down there by train, and it was a bit different to what it is today. But even going down then, you look at Nick, and I think the way he was able to mould his game and his professionalism to get himself right. And when you see somebody, and I've been lucky enough to play alongside, I suppose Adam Goods, who's another person exactly the same, who plays multiple games in a row, and it's not just through luck. It's actually through preparation and recovery, and that's one thing that Nick was very, very good on. His preparation was right. He knew what he needed to do, and his recovery was just as good. So, being able to be a player of that discipline in that era showed that it paid dividends in the end. So, one of the greatest players, of the AFL and also the St Kilda Footy Club. So, I think if anyone out there is listening and any kids are listening, just you go back and think about your preparation and your recovery are two of the major things that Nick did to get himself right every week.
My last one for you. You spoke a little bit off air. We were talking about how, of all the clubs you've played for, Hawthorn and Sydney as well, that you have sort of come back to St Kilda. I guess in terms of that, is it more about you sort of started with St Kilda, you spent most of your career with St Kilda? We would argue you played your best footy with St Kilda, even though you were good, obviously, elsewhere. But it does appear now that your heart lies with the red, white and black, certainly more than the others.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I'm proud to say it. And I know that, I went to Hawthorn and also Sydney and learned a lot going to those football clubs. And you look back now and everybody would love to be a one-club player like, your Robert Harvey, your Stuart Lowe, your Danny Frawley, through the era that I was playing, Nick Lewolds. But it wasn't to be. But, what I love now is the fact that not only just being in the Hall of Fame is that you've got Kenny Sheldon, you've got Russell Morris, these blokes actually building a legacy about the former players. And a lot of the players love getting back there, love talking, the old stories, and love getting around the new blokes as well. And most of us, a lot of us have gone on to do different things and love to support and, look after the younger guys going through, because we know exactly what it was like when we went through. So, no doubt I'm more associated with St Kilda than any other club, and really proud to be and want to continue in the future. And, my young fella, we signed him up into the St Edge Club this year, so he's trying to improve himself through it. And, when we go down there, you see Milne's young fella playing there and a couple of others. So, look, I really enjoy it. Unfortunately, I live on the Gold Coast, I can get down there half a dozen times a year, but those half a dozen times a year, we love it.
And Spide, you touched on the fact that players love coming back to Moorabbin and back to the club. What is it from a player's perspective that makes the place and makes the club so magical? I know as a 34 year-long member and fan, and it's often hard to describe to new supporters or new footy interested people what it is about St Kilda with our history and the losses over the wins and the sacked coaches and all that sort of stuff. What is it from a playing perspective that makes it so magical?
Look, I think, just because, unfortunately with the Saints throughout the years, there's been a lot of dramas. And as you say, from the coaches sitting on, going to the bottom of the ladder and slowly getting up there. And, you've got so much support out there. And we know we're everyone's second favourite team. And, we have got so many passionate St Kilda supporters, but as players, it's just that, as you say, it's that heart and soul of football. That's what it is. The Moorabbin, to come back to Moorabbin, to see it, I know it's been, renovated, but you can still get down on the ground and just feel, what, this is what, that's what footy we play, that's the footy we play for, is the fact that it's such a tight-knit, hard football club. And, we used to have so many great times together, but everyone used to say, we're the party kings, but you know what, there was a lot of teams out there that party harder than us, but we knew that we'd always get to training and have a ball together. So, I think, and what I love about it too is just that the volunteers, I know every club has volunteers, but I can reel off 10, 15 volunteers that have been there even now, since, ever since I was there, and from the doctors to the physios to the people at the front desk to historians, the trainers, and that's what builds football clubs, and that's what builds cultures, and it doesn't matter if you go in there to have a beer with, a former player, a former person that ran water or a physio. I still catch up with the doc today, and that's what it's about. It's just it was just a really tight love football club, and I don't know. That's I don't think. You got 100 years of tradition there. And that's the passion that people bring. I can't see it here on the Gold Coast, and it will take decades and decades for him to build it. So it's hard to explain, but it's one of those things, I suppose, when your back's to the wall a lot of the time, you seem to, galvanise a lot closer.
Yeah, a little bit after football life, and as you're saying, you're living up on the Gold Coast and travelling is your thing. Barring a miracle, our pre-season's going to start a bit earlier than a lot of other teams, and so basically I just want to try and find out from you best location for us to travel to coming up in the off-season, and where's somewhere that keeps drawing you back to go visit?
Oh, look, to be honest, I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot of Australia, New Zealand, over the last couple of years doing my travel show. But, I still believe, and I was lucky enough to do it when I retired in 2008, and as I mentioned, I had that run-in with racial vilification. So I said, you know what, I want to go out to some of the communities in, the back blocks of Northern Territory and WA up around the Kimberleys. And if you can get players to go out there, I don't know if you get a bus, a motorhome, you get some four-wheel drives and go out to some of these communities that absolutely breathe AFL each and every day, and they have not much in their life other than sport. They struggle to get to school, but if there's sport involved, they get there. It's a really, really good eye-opener. So for me, I'd be going to outback Northern Territory, Western Australia, Tiwi Islands, and just getting the boys to really appreciate the opportunity they've got, at the same time giving back, because a lot of these kids in these communities, like 3 hours west of Alice Springs, you got to turn left at a tree that's full of beer cans, turn right at the stack of tyres and get there. And then suddenly you turn up and there's 50, 60 kids, and they're named after Nick Rewalt, Cyril Rioli. That's their names. That's who they've got other names, but they go, no, my name's Nick Rewalt. So I think for kids to see, for people to see that, I didn't see that to the end of my career, but absolutely loved it, and I took my daughters along, and they did as well. So I think if I was a coach these days, and I know Hawthorn will go to Kokoda, but keeping it local, going out to some of those communities and some of the really remote ones where these young kids don't get to see the legends they absolutely idolise, would be enormous for both sides.
Spida, you're a ripper for the Saints. It was always great fun watching you over the journey. Thanks for giving us a slab of your time to have a chat with us this week.
No worries at all. Thank you very much. Anytime.
Peter Spida Everitt there. Fantastic to have him with us on the program. We'll catch up with plenty of other former Saints over the coming weeks. Time to jump into the issues of the week.
The big issues.
And we'll also in this segment get some of your fan mail as well, or if we can call it fan mail, that might sound a little bit cocky. Listener interaction via Twitter, via Instagram. We'll go through all of those socials for you a little bit later on. But before we do that, confirmation from various media sources that Brad Hill will request a trade from Fremantle back to Victoria. Speaking to a lot of people, we're favourites in that race. A lot has to play out in terms of the Cornelio deal and whether that brings other clubs into the party. Do Geelong deal with Fremantle on Tim Kelly or just West Coast? But Brad Hill at this stage, from multiple sources and good sources, guys like Tom Morris and John Ralph and these sorts of people, suggesting that St Kilda are favourites. And I guess the other one is Jack Stephen. Again, Alan Richardson was on SEN during the week, heavily linked to Geelong, and we believe the likes of Charlie Constable in offer. But I guess what do we feel, or how do we feel about both of those, H? Jack Stephen, you would think more likely than not is going to end up at the Cats, unfortunately. But Brad Hill would be a reasonable replacement.
Yeah, the more we hear about Stephen week after week after week, it just seems like it's going to happen. I think we have to deal with that. Give him a game this week, get him back in. Last home game.
Build the currency.
Yeah. And just set him off in the right way. I mean, he has served as well. He's won multiple best and fairests. We can't disown him, really. It happens in our game.
Look, he's been a wonderful servant of the footy club for a long time, and as you said, multiple best and fairest things. He's got 4. Been our best player for, if not the majority of his career, then certainly for a lot of it in times when Rewalt's been out injured or whatnot. But where there's smoke, there's fire, and he's from down that way. He's had a really tough year. Probably wants to be back with the family and closer to the family, where he's more comfortable. And for a guy like that's done as much as he has for our footy club, you can't really begrudge him that at the end of his career.
Yeah, that's right, and we'll wait and see what happens. Brad Hill, as we said, a lot has to happen, but that would be a great inclusion. And we also, from what we can gather from various news sources, that Brad Scott, there was some talk about whether he was even keen to coach again in 2020 or whether he wanted a year off, but it's believed that both Carlton and St Kilda would interview him if he was keen, and I would hope that we would interview him because that's just due diligence, whether it is Brad Ratton or not. At least interview the sample size and get a feel for it. I know some people made fun of North Melbourne, rightly or wrongly, for their exhaustive process that interviewed one person, but I think they've made the right call, North, on the side note. But there's no harm in at least speaking to people. But that Brad Scott one still centres around the service, but I couldn't see anyone else other than those two coaching us.
Well, you're like anything, you give yourself multiple options and take the best. Whether anyone else really comes into the equation, no one's really jumped out yet, but yeah, that's at least two that we can have a look at and work out who's the best out of those two.
I think we would give serious consideration to Robert Harvey if he put his hand up and wanted to interview for the position. He's kind of skirted around the edges of that so far over the last month or so. But like you said, you've got to do your due diligence. He's very highly rated as an assistant coach. They seem to love him as midfield coach at the Pies, and everyone speaks very highly of him. So you'd have to give him at least the opportunity to come in and present.
I agree. And a few from our socials as well. So facebook.com/unplugged, @unplugged on Twitter. Is it also at, what's the Instagrammer again?
Unpluggered Podcast.
Unpluggered Podcast, that's the one. And, of course, unplugged@gmail.com. So Scott Kevin via Twitter says, I can't remember if it was covered in depth last week, but any thoughts on the Waters saga? Any reasons or knowledge why he hasn't returned as an assistant when stat coaches have generally returned somewhere? I think the last statement in that probably says a little bit, Scott, to be honest. And I've loved that series, the Sacked podcast, but I haven't listened to that one. And speaking to a lot of people that sort of are around the club at the time, during the time, that was a decision that St Kilda had to make. I've worked with Scott Waters, lovely fella, but put it this way, the club made the right call.
Yeah, look, I have listened to that podcast, and I think depending on what your perspective is on that situation, he either comes across as very honest and personable or very bitter about what ultimately happened at the end. Not sure we'll ever get the full truth about what happened, but there's certainly different elements of the story that you hear from different parties. It's I guess, a pretty strange part of our history in a club that's got a very strange history. I'm not sure there's too much in it as to why he hasn't returned as assistant coach. I think he kind of took some time off and ended up realising that he kind of enjoys being out of footy.
Yeah.
It was kind of strange when he actually did come in at first too, because he sort of came out of nowhere. It was like Richardson was actually, I think, dead favourite to win the job in that time.
Yeah.
So and certainly the most qualified from what I remember of all the candidates that presented at that stage.
Yeah, as we've said on a off air, and I'll throw this out there on air, and if there's any ramifications, so be it. Speaking to people at his former Waffle club, they, after the fact, notified St Kilda and said all you had to do was ring us and you wouldn't have hired him. So people can read into that whatever they like, but not a lot of due diligence done, unfortunately, by the club before that appointment. But a few others. George Poulos off Twitter with a good nomination for hold or fold. That's probably one that we'll definitely, I reckon, delve into once the dust has settled on the season in terms of holds and folds.
I've also got one from Poker Saint on Twitter who said, St Kilda should trade Jake Carlisle while he has some value. His lack of defensive effort and general demeanour is pathetic. With Wilkie and Battle coming along this year, we can afford to lose a nearly 29-year-old man-child. Agree or disagree?
I think he's 27, but I wouldn't say lack of defensive effort and general demeanour. He has the odd brain explosion, usually one a game, where he'll do something outrageously bad. But I think the good outweighs the bad significantly. His intercept marking, his one-on-one play, he's beaten Tom Lynch this year. He's had a couple of significant wins against some pretty good players. So I think we battled for a long time without him. I still think he's pretty important, given that Nathan Brown, who's held up quite well, is clearly on the verge of retirement, you would think.
Yeah, I wouldn't be getting rid of him anytime soon. We've basically, if you go to a game, I was against the Bulldogs the other week. I was sitting right down on the ground level, and he marshals the back line. He just puts him in position. He's telling him, cover this space, cover that space. He he controls what happens down there. And if you look at it, it worked.
And I think sometimes people can get, I guess, sucked into that idea that he is a bit lackadaisical and that lack of defensive effort. I kind of feel like he's in that category of guys like Nick Del Santo, Scott Pendlebury, who make things look easy, and they they're not the quickest guys, but they are putting in effort, and they have the ability to make things look really easy. And we forget sometimes how good of a player Jake Carlisle is and has been. I think he's shown flashes of being able to get back to that sort of form in moments. He's been out most of the year with a really debilitating injury, and I think for a guy his size, we often take for granted how long it can take for big guys to come back from those sorts of injuries and get his mobility back, his agility, the strength in his legs to contest on the ground and in the air. But I really feel that he's an important part of our spine and our structure moving forward. And yeah, I wouldn't be moving him on anytime soon.
And a few else, any others you like from there, Hage?
Dirty Birds ask about what's happening with Brandon White. I mean, he's playing very good in the VFL at the moment. He's picking up lots of possessions every week and actually playing quite good football. Do we know what's going on with him or not?
I don't know. I get the feeling they went McKenzie because he beat Eddie Betts in round 6 and they thought maybe he could do that again. But yeah, Brandon White gets a lot more of the footy, and he played one game, which was against the Gold Coast in Townsville. Got injured early, I think got a corky or something, and then played the rest of the game in the forward line and then went out of the side with that injury. So, yeah, I would certainly be giving him another crack. He's a good user of the footy. I remember that when he first started. He was a guy that you felt fairly safe when he had the ball in his hands. So I would agree with that from Daniel that, for whatever reason, I think he got injured at the wrong time. But yeah, I get the feeling they just didn't pick him because they thought McKenzie was a better matchup for Eddie Betts.
Probably would have stayed in if he hadn't been injured, yes.
Yep. And a few of those in regards to sort of the post-season as well. Just one last one before we get into the match committee from Tim Rosen. Was it a mistake playing 4 key defenders without a matchup simply because Battle deserved to be in the 22 and Brown's form warranted a spot? Also, was Parker Loney Langland's long hind too many playing similar roles?
Battle was actually named into forward line to start, so that was an interesting lineup. I think maybe the early momentum that Adelaide got may have forced their hand of putting him down the back and seeing what actually could happen, whether the matchups weren't right or because they did get out very early, very easily. His ball use out the back line too generally is very good, so it might have been just a matchup thing. Had to swing him down there and play him from there.
We did mention it briefly last week, I think, when the talk was that Jenkins was going to miss and potential to have too many talls down back if Battle came back in. I guess it kind of turned out a little bit that way, but Battle needs to play. I think he needs to be in the team. He's going to be a really important player for us for a very long time. Wilkie again needed to play. Brown did not deserve to be dropped. He's played some very good, very solid football and has been probably our best big man defender all season. If you count Wilkie as, I guess, kind of the more medium to small size. But, I guess in hindsight, it does look a bit that way when you look at the quality of their small to mid guys that can really cut a team up with their pace and foot skills.
And Benji reminiscing about the old sensational days. That'll come. We'll definitely reflect on that as we go forward. To Timothy, yes, we'll continue the podcast in part during the off-season, looking at some of our off-season moves, trades and drafts, etc. And Christian says, would you bring in Hanbury, Stephen and Webster this week if all three are fit to play? Well, we'll discuss that now for the match committee.
Hi Saints fans, welcome to the round 21 injury report ahead of our game against the Dockers at Marvel Stadium on Sunday afternoon. Jade Gresham will be sidelined for a couple of weeks after fracturing his eye socket on Saturday night. He'll see the specialist tomorrow, so we'll update you next week on his progress. Blake Acres is progressing well with his shoulder injury. He'll need to get through training on Thursday to make himself available, but he was exceptional today, so we expect him to be available for selection. Our sick boys are looking likely to play this week, so Dan Hanbury, Jack Nunes and Ben Patton have all recovered really well after a tough weekend, but they're on track to train on Thursday and also be available for selection. An update on our skipper Darren Geary. We've decided to rule Gears out for the rest of the season. It would have been a bit of a race against the clock to get him back, so now he can just focus on his rehab and get right for the start of pre-season. And lastly, another update on one of our long-term injuries. Max King, progressing really well. He ran twice last week on the Alter G, and he's actually run twice outside as well. So he's doing some work with our running coach and progressing really nicely. So he'll have a good pre-season and look forward to him playing next year. And that's the injury report for this week. Looking forward to seeing a big crowd for our last home game for the year on Sunday afternoon. Go Saints!
So as we spoke about a little bit earlier, Jade Gresham to miss as a result of that fractured eye socket sustained in the Adelaide game. Andrew Wallace, the Saints physio, with an update there for the St Kilda injury wrap. Good news apart from that, and really good news with Max King too. I think everyone's pretty excited about what Ben's doing up on the Gold Coast. Not for anything sinister like poaching him down, but more... if we're seeing him perform that well and Max King's considered to be at least the equal, perhaps a little bit better, that's a very exciting prospect, hopefully, when the 2020 pre-season does roll around in earnest. So I guess starting off with that, as we look to Fremantle, who had one of their best wins of the season on the weekend against Geelong, so they're back in a bit of form and they are mathematically a chance of playing finals. They've got, I think, Essendon at home and then Port Adelaide away after us, so it's not an easy draw for them, but... they're the big ones. Dan Hanbury, a lot of people, and I put my hand up asking the question about the gastro last week, and turns out it was legit because half the group had it as well. Jack Stephen, another solid showing in a Sandy side that got flogged by Essendon. And Jimmy Webster probably has done enough. What are we thinking in terms of changes?
Yeah, I think you'll find, with at least Gresham out, one of those three are definitely an in. I'd say Hanbury's probably the change for him. Then other players, we had a few that struggled, so chances are that we are going to swing the axe on a couple of them.
Yeah, Langland's might need a spell. Nunes, I think, plays.
Yeah, he comes in as well. It's one of those weeks where we didn't play great, so there's definitely a look at some changes will be a good idea to have this week.
I reckon they'll squeeze out, you'd think, one of Parker, Hind or Long, preferably not Long.
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, I think Matty Parker's probably done his dash for the season and probably needs a bit of a rest. Nunes, as Aisha said, probably comes straight back in if he's good to go. And the other guys that we mentioned are quality players, and they're in the side if they're available. They've all played a couple of weeks now, except for Hannah's who's missed. But I think they all come back in if they're fit, and I believe that they are. I think Stephen slots straight back in the middle. Hanbury, if he's fit again, and that's a question we've asked most of the year. But if he's fit and good to go, he comes in. And I think the goal will be to get him to play a couple of consecutive weeks to finish out the season, get a bit of confidence back in him and some miles in the legs heading into what needs to be a really strong off-season and pre-season for him.
So Gresham, I said it's been typical of the year that we've almost been counting down the injury list thinking, it's getting a little bit smaller, players are coming back, but then you get one back and you lose another one. So it's sort of been typical of us the whole way through that when Jack Stephen was nearing a return, Hanbury went back out of the side and Battle obviously went down too, just when Carlisle came back. So it's been one of those years, but what are the confidence levels like? I mean, Fremantle were in all sorts of trouble prior to last week. Was that a last resistance, or was that a sign that their form is sort of coming back a little bit? Bearing in mind they've beaten Collingwood and GWS away from home this year.
Yeah, well, it is Fremantle in Melbourne, and we saw them 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they were putrid. Yeah,
yeah. At Docklands, they're not the best team going around. We've seen some pretty ordinary performances from them there before. Yes, they're fighting for finals. They probably will really come out there and give it a good go. Question is, it's a matter of which of their teams turns up. They can be switched on, or they can just be absolute putrid.
They've put up some very ordinary performances this season, and I think if you kind of want to look at Freo's season as a whole, kind of look at the back end of Ross Lyon's time at St Kilda, and some similar traits are starting to creep in, I think, into the playing list. They're not running back, they're not tracking back as they might have done in previous seasons. They're not supporting the teammates as much as they could. Even when they do something good and kick a good goal or take a big grab, not getting around each other as much as they normally would. And I think that's a big trait of sides that are on the verge of being successful or being successful, and they've proven to be, when the pressure's on, they're not much chop this season, and this is a really winnable game for us. I think probably out of the last three, this is the one that we really should win out of all of them. I think Carlton will be tough. Sydney's always tough. This one, we should really put the stamp on our season at home, our last home game, and give the fans something to cheer about in the last home game.
And the equation, just before we wrap up, if St Kilda are to make the 8, which is not mathematically impossible yet, so what St Kilda would need is for Adelaide to lose all 3 games, which is against West Coast in Perth, Collingwood in Adelaide, Bulldogs in Ballarat, possible, but you think they might jag one. We'd need Port Adelaide to only win once, and they play... That's the worry, because they've got Sydney at home and Fremantle at home, and the other game is North at Marvel, which they could lose. So we need them to only win one. We need the Bulldogs to only win one, and that needs to be Adelaide in the last round, which means that we would need them to lose to GWS away and Essendon. So they're possible. Yeah, and obviously if we beat Fremantle, we take them out of business. So they're the equations. It's unlikely because I think Port would win one of those 2 home games that they've got. Or both. Actually, we need them to not win. Yeah, we need them to only win one more game. So they can win one of them. We can't have them win both. So.
We need to win fairly convincingly.
Yeah,
correct. So it's unlikely, but it's not impossible. So fingers crossed. Go Saints for Sunday at 1 o'clock. Keep those correspondents coming through. Facebook.com/Unplugged. Twitter @Unplugged. @Unpluggered Podcast on Instagram. Unplugged@gmail.com. Boys, hopefully win number 9 and maybe a light flicker for Sunday.
Yeah, it'd be nice to go down and watch the final home game, get a win under the belt. I did read today all members' names will be displayed on the banner. Just another little thing for all the members this year. So get down there, last home game, get us home.
Yeah, support the club. We want to finish the year off really strong, and as I said earlier, get the miles in the legs into a really strong off-season, pre-season, and come back next year with a group of really exciting, promising kids to join the group. You guys like King and Bytel, which really should be banging down the door for round 1 positions in the squad. And if we can win 1, 2, even 3 of the last couple of games, even if we don't make September action, it's a really important thing for us to finish the year strong and build some of that confidence going into the next season.
And we can start it on Sunday. Go Saints.
This is Unplugged, talking all things red, white and black.